Hi everybody, this is the lecture to accompany Chapter 5 in your textbook. Please read Chapter 5. There's a lot of information in it that I don't have time to address in this lecture. Okay, let's talk about becoming a group. This chapter's case review is very touching and inspiring. A church choir director recovering from a serious accident decides as part of his rehabilitation to direct and star in a grassroots performance of Man of La Mancha. As a former theater actress myself, I can tell you that this is no small task. He used his church choir members as the cast and crew. While a few of them had previous theater experience, not one of them was a professional. However, if you read the case study, you will see that everyone had something to offer. People who couldn't sing well could do other necessary tasks. Together they put on a very complicated musical in just 3 weeks and garnered lots of praise and respect from their audiences. Why was this endeavor so successful? Because the cast and crew grew into a cohesive, effective team due to their persistence, communication, management, and leadership capabilities. They supported each other. Their determination led them to success. The term structuration refers to the way the members create and maintain their group. The theory of structuration says that verbal and nonverbal communication among group members creates the group's norms, procedures, and climate, and maintains them once they're established. The key to this process is, of course, communication. The theory contains 3 important assumptions. First, members don't come to the group with a clean slate. They come with preconceived notions of what a group is supposed to be like. Maybe they've even been in a group before, or maybe they have knowledge specific to that group's task. Like the 2 people in the case study who had community theater experience and could speak to how to behave professionally in this situation. If you recall, these are the inputs spoken of previously, the information, knowledge, and experience that group members bring with them to the group. Second, there is no law that forces group members to follow any particular rules of behavior. There's no group police out there that's going to write you a ticket if you don't conform. In fact, if somebody tried to force me to conform to the rules of a group, I'd be a little annoyed and I might even quit that group. People conform to a group's rules and norms because they make sense and help the group meet its goals. And if the group members are helpful and supportive, most people are willing to follow the rules of that group. Third, a group is always in the process of becoming something, but it's never really created in a final sense. It's always changing, morphing into something hopefully better. Of course, your group will have an end, but until that happens, it will be constantly evolving. Groups are obviously formed to complete certain tasks or jobs, but that's not all they have to deal with. Groups have 2 main functions: to manage the task and get the job done, but also to manage the socio-emotional aspects of the group. And frankly, at the beginning of the group's formation, the socio-emotional part is the most important. The group needs to get to know each other and develop dependable and harmonious relationships. If you don't deal with the things that naturally arise when you put people together, you're not going to have a functional, effective group. Yes, you still have to attend to the task, you can't ignore it, but you have to realize that all groups naturally experience 3 types of tensions that need to be understood and handled effectively: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary tensions generally occur early on when the members are just getting to know each other. People tend to be hesitant at first, not quite sure where they fit into the group, kind of feeling their way. It's the way that we work out our relationships and roles within the group. Then secondary tensions come into play. This is based more on the task, as different opinions and perspectives may possibly lead to disagreements, and the group members may struggle to work through these things. And tertiary tension, which is basically a power struggle, can appear if members argue about who's in charge. These tensions can certainly be detrimental to the group's progress if left unchecked, but there are ways to manage these natural tensions that occur. Primary tensions will subside once people know each other, so you should definitely take some time in the beginning for conversations to find out about the other members of your group. Go for coffee, sit around and laugh, do things together. You don't have to become lifelong friends, although that sometimes does happen, but you do need to have a level of familiarity with your group members. As far as the task is concerned, When group members share what they know about it, that can help alleviate both primary and secondary tensions. Something that will be very helpful in managing and alleviating tensions is having a tolerance for disagreement. What if someone holds an opposite viewpoint from you? Do you insist on being right, or are you willing to listen to someone else's viewpoint, not to necessarily accept it, but to acknowledge that there are often different ways of seeing things? Even if you don't agree, a different perspective on a topic can often lead to better and more effective solutions. One of the most effective ways to diffuse tension is to infuse humor into the situation. Not rudeness or making fun of people, but lighthearted jokes that help people feel better can help group members take a step back and be more open with each other. The book addresses two theories about the ways in which groups develop: Tuckman's model of group development and Gersich's two-phase model. Tuckman's model says that groups go through 5 developmental stages: forming, in which members get their first impressions of each other and their task; storming, in which they begin to tackle the task and may butt heads with each other as opinions and ideas come out; norming, which occurs once the group has worked through its initial conflicts and settled into becoming a real group; performing, where the groups work smoothly and effectively together; and finally, adjourning, when the group has completed its task and the group either ends or moves on to another task. Gersich's two-phase model is different. It says that generally, whatever the task is and however long the group is given to complete that task, that a major change in focus occurs at the midpoint. The first half, members orient themselves to the task and plan, and during the second half, they execute that plan. The term socialization means learning to fit in with others in a new situation. Group socialization is the process by which group members learn to work together. Communication, of course, is the key to effective group socialization. There's a period of adjustment and adaptation as members come to know each other and to know what's expected of them. The group members need to understand that their individual goals, probably to get a good grade in the class, and the group's goal, to deliver successful presentations, are intertwined. There are typically 5 stages of the socialization process. The antecedent stage occurs before the group is formed. Members come with certain attitudes, beliefs, and behavior patterns that will impact how they will function in the group. The anticipatory stage occurs right at the start of group formation, when members meet each other and attempt to overcome primary tension. The encounter stage happens when members begin to work together and realize they have to adjust to each other. The assimilation stage occurs when the new relationships have been worked out and everyone's fully integrated into the group. And the exit stage is the end of the project, when the task is completed, so members must adjust to the termination of the group if it's an ad hoc group, or for some members to move on and others to stay while new members come in if it's a standing committee. Then the process of socialization would start all over again. Your role is the part you play in a group. Everyone plays at least one role in a group. What those roles are depends on your personality, your commitment, your talents and abilities, and your expertise. There are 2 main types of roles: formal roles, which are generally assigned or voted on and come with specific duties and responsibilities, like chairperson or secretary. And there are also behavioral roles, which are informal and unassigned, but tend to emerge during group interactions. The main types of behavioral roles are task, maintenance, and individual. Task roles are behaviors that you take on that specifically contribute to the group's task. If, for instance, you volunteered to interview the college president to get some information for your group, because you've met him before and feel comfortable talking to him, then that's a task role that you've taken on. Maintenance roles are those behaviors that we do within the group to help it run harmoniously, like expressing support or reducing and relieving tension. Task and maintenance roles are both positive things we do in groups. Individual roles, however, consist of self-centered behaviors where we put our needs ahead of the group's. So things like complaining or criticizing, not showing up for meetings, acting like you don't care, or acting helpless are examples of this kind of behavioral role. Please don't be that person. It's through your communication with each other that members create your roles. The roles that a person plays in different groups of which they're members depends on both their unique personality and characteristics and the unique needs of each group. So it's likely that you might be a strong leader in one group due to your background and expertise, and maybe not a leader in another group, but someone who finds a niche where you can contribute. You can't expect that you're always going to play the same role in every group, and as groups evolve, you may find that your role may evolve and change as well. Remember that group members do not come to groups with a total understanding of how to behave. We do have knowledge of groups and generally how they work, but we don't have knowledge of this particular group because each group is different. So each group, while it doesn't have to start from scratch in terms of how it's going to work, does need to create its own set of rules and norms. Rules are formal and explicit standards of behavior. These are the things that you're going to discuss and agree to implement as a group, and you'll write them down, and everyone will decide together that this is how you will proceed. Norms, on the other hand, are informal and implicit standards of behavior that just come naturally as the group progresses. And while you don't necessarily discuss them, everyone just does them. Here's an example. Let's say you all discuss and decide to keep your meetings to 1 hour in length, and you write that down. That's a rule. But every time you have a meeting, while you formally end it after an hour, everyone just sits around and keeps talking for another 20 minutes after it's over, and you do it every time you meet. Well, that's a norm. So if someone all of a sudden were to decide to get up and leave right after the meeting, you'd notice and say, what's wrong with that person? They followed the rule, but they didn't follow the norm. Norms develop in several different ways. They can develop through primacy, which means the first thing that people do tends to be repeated. They can be explicit, which means clearly articulated. So someone says, hey, let's do this, and it never gets written down as a rule, but it's still accepted as something the group does. Another way a norm can be established is as a response to something negative that happens in the group so that it doesn't happen again. Sometimes norms can be a bit problematic if they result from a clash or misunderstanding of cultures. The book gives examples of cultures in which submission in groups is normal or where vocal back-channeling is also normal. It can become a norm of a group that some people just don't talk or other people talk quite a lot. Behaviors that occur consistently from one meeting to the next are very likely norms. Many are quite productive and help the group get their work done. There are some personality types, however, who don't like to follow the group and tend to violate group norms. These are called deviants. Now, if it's a productive group norm, that can be very disruptive and disconcerting to the other group members. How can they deal with a deviant? Well, they can reason with them, letting them know that their input is needed and they can continue to follow the norm, or they can decide to ignore the deviant behavior. This puts pressure on the deviant, who may decide it's better to simply fall in line with the other group members. One thing you should look at, though, is whether or not this norm is actually in the best interests of the group. Maybe the norm is not particularly productive and should be changed. The book gives some good ways to address and possibly change norms that are not of benefit to the group. According to experts in group conflict Folger and Poole, climate is, and I quote, the relatively enduring quality of the group situation that is experienced in common by group members and arises from and influences their interactions and behavior. Climates, whether positive or negative, are the ongoing consequences of member communication and relationships. Groups with negative climates tend to have meetings that are tense, defensive, and even hostile. Those with positive climates tend to be empowering, flexible, and have a large amount of participation among members. This is not to say that groups with a positive climate never have conflict, but the members can disagree without being disagreeable and are open to the ideas of other people and willing to look at different points of view without immediately getting defensive. 3 dimensions of group interaction are necessary to achieve and maintain a positive climate. Trust or reliance on the other group members. We need to be able to trust that other group members will complete necessary tasks that they volunteer for or are assigned to. Trust develops when we're willing to help one another and take a personal interest in each other. Cohesiveness has to do with creating bonds with each other. Again, you don't have to end up being lifelong friends to have a cohesive work group. Members need to understand and be committed to the task, and they need to basically like each other. More cohesive groups tend to be more productive, but Cohesive groups also need to guard against something called groupthink, in which people get along so well and think so much alike that they don't really stop to critically examine all aspects of their conclusions. Sometimes a group does need to step back and say, are we on the right track? Do we have the best information? And are we coming to the right conclusion? Here's a list comparing defensive behaviors, which can lead to a negative climate, and supportive behaviors that can help foster a positive climate. On the negative side, evaluation means criticizing other people's ideas, as in, that's a stupid idea or that's never going to work. Control means that you try to dominate or change another's ideas or behavior and have things your own way. Strategy means the use of manipulation to achieve your own goals. Neutrality means acting like you don't care about how the other members feel or think. Superiority means to act as if you're better than the other members. And certainty has to do with being a know-it-all and not being open to other people's ideas. People who tend to do these things are not helping create a positive climate. Supportive behaviors, on the other hand, will add to the positive climate of a group. Description instead of evaluation, or instead of criticizing, you attempt to understand the other person's idea. Problem orientation means that you are searching honestly for the best solution instead of deciding your way is the right way. Spontaneity is openness and honesty. Empathy means putting yourself in another person's situation and trying to imagine how you would respond and acting like you care about your group members. Equality, of course, means treating everyone with respect and not thinking you're better than them. Provisionalism has to do with not being a know-it-all and putting your ideas out there by saying things like, I have an idea I think might work, rather than saying you have the one and only correct answer. As your group begins to develop, you should be very aware of these standards of ethical behavior and make sure your group is following them. Communicate to develop a supportive climate. If group members think they will be ignored or ridiculed, they're likely not to communicate at all. Honest disagreements need to occur in a supportive environment where people trust each other. Communication that degrades people should not be tolerated. Bullying, ridiculing others, those kinds of things have to be stopped immediately. Groups where things like this occur often fall apart and fail in their mission. Encourage divergent opinions. It's good to look at a problem from all sides, and toleration of different opinions is helpful. Conflict is a natural part of human interaction. It doesn't mean the group can't work together. The best solutions often spring from people discussing through their differences. Members should be willing to honestly express their ideas, even if they are different from others in the group. It's not really ethical to go along with the group's ideas if they diverge radically from your own. If you see a problem, you should say something. If the climate of the group is positive, the group will be able to work through disagreements. We will discuss ways to handle conflict in later chapters. This is the end of the lecture on Chapter 5.